My late wife's necklace was the only thing I had left of her. It was not just gold and sapphire, it was the vessel that held 40 years of my life. When I opened the safe and found it empty, my heart stopped beating for a full minute. I ran to my daughter begging for answers, and she just looked up from her phone and said, "The necklace was sold." "Dad, I needed the money for a vacation to Bali." I stood there, frozen, unable to comprehend the cruelty. But that was nothing compared to what happened next. When I finally tracked down the pawn shop to try and buy the necklace back, the owner looked at me with a face pale as a ghost. He said, "Sir, you will not believe what we found when we opened the hidden mechanism behind the medallion." I stared at him confused and said I did not know it opened. He handed me a magnifying glass, and what I saw inside that locket changed everything. It turned my grief into a cold, hard rage that I never knew I possessed. Before I tell you what was hidden inside that necklace, and how I made them pay for every single tear, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who mistook your kindness for weakness. My name is Jerry Patton, and I am a 68-year-old retired structural engineer living in Seattle, Washington. I spent my life calculating loads and stresses, ensuring that buildings would not collapse under pressure. But I never calculated the stress that would break the foundation of my own family. It was a Tuesday morning, raining just like it always does in the Pacific Northwest, when my world quietly fell apart. Today marked exactly 1 year since Catherine, my wife of 4 decades, lost her battle with cancer. The house felt too big without her. The silence in the hallways was heavy. I had woken up early with a specific purpose. Catherine had a vintage gold locket, a beautiful piece from the 1920s, with a deep blue sapphire in the center. She wore it every single day. On her deathbed, she made me promise to keep it safe. She said, "Jerry, this is for you. Don't let it go." I walked into my study, my hands trembling slightly, not from age, but from the weight of the day. I wanted to take the necklace to the jeweler to have it polished before visiting her grave. I wanted it to shine just like she did. I moved the painting of the old lighthouse on the wall to reveal the wall safe. I spun the dial. Right to 24, left to 10, right to 5. The heavy steel door clicked and swung open. My hand reached into the dark space, expecting to feel the soft velvet of the jewelry box. But my fingers grasped nothing but cold air. I frowned and reached deeper. Empty. Panic is a strange sensation. It starts in the stomach like a drop of ice water and spreads instantly to the fingertips. I pulled everything out of the safe. The deeds to the house were there. My passport was there. But the velvet box was gone. I tore the room apart. I pulled books off the shelves. I looked under the rug. I checked the safe again and again, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe grief was making me blind. But deep down, my engineer brain knew the truth. Matter does not simply vanish. Someone had removed it. And there were only 3 people who lived in this house. Me, my daughter Brittany, and her husband Travis. I walked down the stairs, my legs feeling heavy as lead. I could hear laughter coming from the kitchen. The smell of expensive coffee and bacon filled the air. It was a smell that felt offensive given the heaviness of the day. I walked into the kitchen, and there they were. Brittany was sitting at the island, scrolling through her phone, her manicured nails tapping against the screen. Travis was flipping through a travel magazine, a smug smile plastered on his face. They looked so comfortable, so unbothered. They were living in my house, eating my food, and spending my retirement savings while I was drowning in grief upstairs. Brittany looked up, her eyes scanning me briefly before returning to her screen. "Good morning, Dad," she said, but her tone was flat, devoid of any real warmth. "You look terrible. Did you sleep okay?" I did not answer. I walked straight to the counter and slammed my hand down. The sound made Travis jump and drop his magazine. Brittany just sighed, rolling her eyes as if my distress was an inconvenience to her morning routine. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice shaking. Where is what, Dad? Brittany asked, taking a sip of her latte. Your mother's necklace, I said. The locket. It is gone from the safe. Who touched the safe? Brittany exchanged a quick glance with Travis. It was a look I had seen before. A look of conspiracy. A look that said, here we go again with the old man. She put her phone down slowly and let out a long, dramatic breath. Oh, that, she said casually, as if we were discussing a missing pair of socks. I took it, Dad. You took it, I repeated, my brain struggling to process her nonchalance. You took it to clean it. You took it to wear it. Why did you take it, Brittany? I sold it, she said. The world stopped spinning. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to vanish. The rain against the window went silent. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. You what? I whispered. I sold it, she said louder this time, her voice taking on a defensive, sharp edge. Look, Dad. Travis and I have been really stressed lately. We needed a break. We booked this amazing retreat in Bali, but we were a little short on the deposit. I knew that necklace was just sitting in the dark, gathering dust. It is not like Mom is using it anymore. So I took it to a pawn shop downtown. I stared at her. This was the girl I had carried on my shoulders at the zoo. This was the girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged. This was the girl Catherine and I had saved for years to put through college. And she was sitting there telling me she had traded her mother's soul for a week on a beach. You sold your mother's necklace for a vacation, I asked, my voice rising to a shout. That was the only thing I had left of her, Brittany. How could you? Stop being so dramatic, Jerry Travis chimed in. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. It is just an object. Catherine would want us to be happy. She would not want us stressing out over bills while some old piece of metal sits in a wall. Besides, you have plenty of other things to remember her by. You have the photos. You have this giant house. Stop acting like a victim. I felt a surge of heat rise up my neck. I looked at Travis, this man who had never held a steady job for more than 6 months. This man who called himself an entrepreneur, but really just lived off my generosity. Get out, I said, pointing to the door. Both of you. Get out of my sight. Brittany stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You are being ridiculous, Dad, she snapped. You are acting crazy. This is exactly why we need this vacation. Dealing with you is exhausting. You are obsessed with the past. You are obsessed with dead people and dead things. We are alive, Dad. We are here, and we need to live. I need that necklace back, I said, ignoring her insults. Where did you sell it? Which shop? I do not remember, she lied. I could tell she was lying. She looked away. It was some place on 4th Avenue. I do not know the name. Just let it go, Dad. It is gone. Just like Mom is gone. Get over it. She grabbed her purse and signaled to Travis. Come on, babe, let's go get brunch somewhere else. The energy in here is toxic. They walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there shaking amidst the smell of bacon and betrayal. I listened to the front door slam shut. I listened to the engine of the car I bought them start up and drive away. I collapsed onto a kitchen stool and buried my face in my hands. I wanted to cry, but the tears would not come. Instead, a cold clarity began to settle over me. They thought I was weak. They thought I was just a sad old man who would yell for a bit and then go back to his room. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I was an engineer. I fixed things that were broken. And my family was broken beyond repair. I waited 10 minutes to make sure they were truly gone. Then I went to the phone. Not my cell phone, because I knew Travis had installed some family tracking app on it, claiming it was for my safety. I went to the old landline in the study, the one they thought I never used. I pulled out the yellow pages. I know it sounds archaic, but I kept them. I started calling every pawn shop on 4th Avenue. My voice was steady as I described the item. Vintage gold locket, sapphire center, engraved with the initials CP on the back. The first 3 shops had nothing. The 4th one hung up on me. But the 5th one, a place called Sal's Gold and Loan, paused. "Yeah, I have it," the voice on the other end said. "Just came in yesterday. A young woman brought it in. Said it was an inheritance she didn't want." I felt a wave of relief so strong it almost knocked me over. "Don't sell it," I said. "Please. I am coming right now. I will pay whatever you want." I grabbed my keys and my emergency cash stash that I kept hidden inside a hollowed-out book on structural dynamics. Brittany and Travis didn't know about the cash. They thought they controlled all my accounts, but I had learned long ago to always have a backup plan. I drove through the rain, my wipers slashing back and forth like a metronome counting down the moments. The pawn shop was located in a rougher part of town sandwiched between a liquor store and a vacant lot. The windows were covered in iron bars. I pushed open the heavy door, and a bell chimed above my head. The smell of old dust and metal hit me. The shop was cluttered with musical instruments, power tools, and glass cases filled with jewelry that had once meant something to someone. Behind the counter stood a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He was bald, with a thick gray beard, and tattoos fading on his forearms. He was cleaning a watch with a small cloth. "You the guy who called about the sapphire?" he asked without looking up. "Yes," I said, stepping forward. "I am Jerry. That necklace was stolen from me." "Technically, it wasn't stolen," the man said, putting the watch down. "The lady had ID. She had the same last name as the engraving. She signed the papers. Legally, it is mine now." I slammed a stack of $100 bills onto the glass counter. It was $5,000. 10 times what Brittany had likely sold it for. "I am not here to argue the law," I said, looking him in the eye. "That necklace belonged to my wife. She died a year ago today. My daughter sold it to go on a vacation. I am buying it back." The man Sal stopped what he was doing. He looked at the money, then he looked at me. His expression softened just a fraction. He reached under the counter and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was the locket. Seeing it there in a cheap Ziploc bag made my stomach turn. Sal looked at the bag, then back at me. He didn't touch the money. "She sold this for $500, he said quietly. "She told me it was junk costume jewelry from her grandmother's attic." "She lied," I said. Sal sighed. He picked up the locket and took it out of the bag. He held it under the light. "You know, Mr. Jerry, I see a lot of bad things in this line of work. Junkies selling wedding rings, kids selling their parents' tools, but selling a mother's deathbed keepsake for a plane ticket, that is a special kind of low." He pushed the money back toward me. "I only want what I paid her plus a 20 for the paperwork. 520. Keep the rest." I blinked, surprised by his honor. "Thank you, Sal," I said. "You have no idea what this means to me." "Wait," Sal said, raising a hand. "Before you take it, there is something you need to see." I was going to melt this down for the gold value this afternoon. I started prepping it. I noticed the hinge was a little stiff, so I used my jeweler's loop to check the mechanism. He pulled a small, specialized tool from his pocket. He held the locket up. "Most lockets just open to show a picture, right?" Sal asked. "But this is custom work. Old-school craftsmanship. There is a secondary catch hidden under the rim of the sapphire setting. I didn't see it at first. I doubt your daughter knew it was there either." He pressed the tip of his tool into a microscopic groove near the gem. There was a tiny, almost inaudible click. The face of the locket, which I had always assumed was solid, slid sideways. It revealed a hidden compartment beneath the space where the photo would usually sit. My mouth fell open. I had been married to Catherine for 40 years. I had bought her this necklace for our 10th anniversary. I never knew it did that. "I didn't know it opened," I whispered. Sal nodded. Neither did I. But look what was inside. He used tweezers to pull out two items. The first was a tiny piece of paper folded into a square the size of a fingernail. The second was a micro SD card, the kind you put in a phone or a camera. It was incredibly small, nestled perfectly in the hollow space. I took the paper with trembling fingers. I unfolded it carefully, terrified it might crumble to dust. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was elegant but shaky, written in the final weeks of her life when her strength was failing. It read simply, "Jerry, if you are reading this, then I am gone. I am sorry I could not tell you in person. I did not want to break your heart while I was still dying. But you need to know the truth about Travis, and you need to know what our daughter has become. Do not trust them, Jerry. Watch the card. Love always, Cat." I stared at the note, the letters blurring as tears finally filled my eyes. Catherine knew. She knew something terrible, and she had hidden it here, waiting for me to find it. She knew Brittany would sell the necklace. She counted on it. Or maybe she hoped I would find the secret before they got their hands on it. Either way, this was a message from the grave. "What is on the card?" I asked Sal, my voice barely a whisper. Sal shook his head. I didn't look. I respect a man's privacy. But whatever it is, it was important enough to hide inside gold. I took the SD card and the note. I placed the $520 on the counter. Then I added another $500. "Take it," I said. "For your honesty. And for not melting down my life." Sal nodded, solemn and respectful. "Good luck, Jerry. If you need anything else, you know where to find me." I walked out of the pawn shop, clutching the necklace so tight the metal dug into my palm. The rain was coming down harder now, washing the grime off the city streets. But it could not wash away the feeling of dread settling in my gut. Catherine had left me a warning. My wife, who never said a bad word about anyone, had used her final strength to warn me about our own children. I sat in my car and held the tiny SD card up to the light. It looked so innocent. Just a small square of black plastic. But I knew it was a bomb, and I was about to detonate it. I drove not home but to the only place I knew was safe. The office of Penny Hart, my family lawyer, and one of the few people Catherine trusted implicitly. I did not know it then, but as I drove through the rainy streets of Seattle, I was no longer just a grieving widower. I was a man on a mission. The Gerald who just wanted to visit his wife's grave was gone. In his place was a structural engineer who had just discovered a massive crack in the foundation of his life, and I was about to bring the whole house down on top of the people who broke it. As I sat in the waiting room of the law firm clutching the cold gold of the locket, I thought about Brittany's face when she told me she sold it. The lack of remorse. The entitlement. She thought she had won. She thought she had traded a useless trinket for a tropical paradise. She had no idea she had just handed me the weapon that would destroy her. The receptionist called my name. "Mr. Patton Penny is ready for you now." I stood up. I put the necklace around my own neck, tucking it under my shirt where it rested against my beating heart. I walked into the office ready to see what Catherine had died trying to tell me. The vacation was over. The war had just begun. Penny Hart sat across from me behind her massive mahogany desk. The rain lashed against the windows of her downtown Seattle office, creating a gray backdrop to the most colorful nightmare of my life. I had known Penny for 30 years. We had attended barbecues together. She had helped Catherine and me write our wills. I had never seen her look nervous until this moment. Her hands, usually so steady, were shaking slightly as she took the tiny SD card from my palm. She inserted it into her laptop with a soft click that sounded like the cocking of a gun. I sat there clutching the arms of the leather chair. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face remained stone. I was an engineer. When a building is about to collapse, you do not panic. You assess the damage, you look for the cracks, you calculate the failure point. And right now, I was staring at the structural failure of my entire bloodline. "Ready, Jerry?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded. "Just play it, Penny. I need to see what my wife died trying to tell me." She hit the spacebar. A video window opened on the large monitor facing me. The footage was shaky at first, clearly recorded from a hidden camera. Based on the angle, it looked like it was filming from inside a parked car. The timestamp in the corner showed a date from 3 months ago. I squinted at the screen. I saw my son-in-law, Travis. He was sitting in the driver's seat of his leased Mercedes, the one I helped him make the down payment on. But he was not alone. In the passenger seat was a woman who was definitely not my daughter, Brittany. She was younger, with bleached blonde hair, and she was laughing at something he said. I watched in silence as Travis leaned over and kissed her. It was not a peck on the cheek. It was passionate. It was possessed. It was the kind of kiss he had not given my daughter in years. My stomach turned. Infidelity was a sin, but in the grand scheme of things, it was a common one. If this was all Catherine had to show me, I would have been disappointed. But then the talking started. Penny turned up the volume. Travis' voice filled the quiet office. "Don't worry, babe," he said to the woman. "The old man is losing it. He is totally checked out since Catherine died. He wanders around that big house like a ghost. He has no idea what is going on with the finances." The woman giggled. "But what about Brittany? Won't she notice?" Travis laughed, a cruel barking sound. "Brittany is as clueless as her father. As long as I keep her distracted with trips and shopping, she doesn't ask questions. She is desperate to keep up appearances on Instagram. I just tell her I closed a big deal and she believes it. She doesn't need to know the money is coming from the equity line." "The equity line." I froze. I looked at Penny. She paused the video. Her face was grim. "There is more, Jerry," she said, sliding a file folder across the desk. Catherine hired a private investigator 6 months before she passed. She suspected Travis was up to something, but she didn't know the scale of it until the end. This is what was on the rest of the memory card. Documents. Scanned copies of loan applications. I opened the folder. The first page made the air leave my lungs. It was a deed of trust, a second mortgage taken out on our vacation home in Lake Chelan. That cabin was my sanctuary. I had built the deck with my own hands. I taught Brittany to fish on that dock. It was fully paid off 10 years ago. It was supposed to be a legacy for my grandchildren if I ever had any. But here on this paper was a loan for $200,000 from a private lending company I had never heard of. The interest rate was predatory. And at the bottom of the page were 2 signatures. One was Travis, the other was Brittany. But as I looked closer, I pulled my reading glasses from my pocket and leaned in. I knew my daughter's handwriting. I knew the way she looped her Y's and crossed her T's. This signature was close, but it was too stiff. It lacked her natural flow. "That is a forgery," I whispered. Penny nodded. The investigator confirmed it. Travis forged Brittany's signature to secure the loan. But here is the kicker, Jerry. Look at the date. I looked. The date was 2 weeks after Catherine was admitted to hospice care. While I was sitting by my wife's bedside holding her hand as she faded away, Travis was busy leveraging my property to fund his lifestyle. Penny continued, her voice professional but laced with anger. "Under Washington state law, this is fraud in the first degree. It is also elder financial abuse because the property is technically in a trust that benefits you. But it gets worse." She flipped to the next page. "He stopped making payments 3 months ago. The lender has already issued a notice of default. They have been sending the notices to a P.O. box Travis set up so you wouldn't see them coming to the house. Jerry, if we don't act fast, they are going to foreclose on the cabin. You could lose it within 60 days. I sat back in the chair. The shock was gone. The nausea was gone. In their place was something cold and hard. It felt like steel settling in my spine. For the last year, I had been a grieving widower. I had been soft. I had been vulnerable. I had let them walk all over me because I was afraid of being alone. I was afraid of losing the only family I had left. But looking at these papers, listening to Travis call me a ghost, I realized something profound. I didn't have a family. I had parasites. Brittany sold her mother's necklace for a vacation. Travis stole my cabin for a mistress. They were not just ungrateful. They were dangerous. They were eating me alive one bite at a time and laughing while they did it. Jerry Penny said, gently interrupting my thoughts. We can go to the police right now. We have enough here to arrest Travis for fraud and forgery. We can file a civil suit against Brittany for the theft of the necklace. We can stop this today. I looked at the video of Travis still frozen on the screen. I looked at the forged signature. I thought about the way Brittany looked at me this morning. The way she dismissed my pain. The way she told me to get over it. If I go to the police now, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, Travis goes to jail. Brittany cries and claims she didn't know. She plays the victim. She begs for my help. And because I am her father, I might be weak enough to give it. I closed the file folder. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the rainy streets of Seattle. The traffic moved in a steady rhythm. Systems. Everything was a system. And every system had a breaking point. No, Penny, I said, turning back to her. Mo, I don't want to just stop them. I want to teach them. I walked back to the desk and tapped the folder. Keep this safe. Don't file anything yet. Contact the lender for the cabin quietly and pay off the arrears from my private savings. I don't want the foreclosure to happen yet. I want the debt to stay active. Penny looked confused. Jerry, what are you planning? I picked up the locket from the desk. I ran my thumb over the cold sapphire. They think I am a senile old man, I said. They think I am losing my mind. They think I am weak. So I am going to be exactly who they think I am. I am going to give them enough rope not just to hang themselves, but to pull their entire world down. I looked Penny in the eye. Prepare a power of attorney document. Make it look standard. But I want you to draft a second document. A confession of debt. A promissory note secured by all personal assets. Make them look identical. Penny's eyes widened. She was a lawyer, but she was also a friend. She understood exactly where I was going. A smile, a very small, very dangerous smile, touched her lips. You are going to bait the trap, she said. I am going to bring the house down, I replied. I left Penny's office with the copies of the evidence tucked inside my jacket. The rain didn't bother me anymore. I felt energized. I felt a purpose I hadn't felt since I was working on the suspension bridge downtown. My grief for Catherine was still there, but now it had a guardian. A cold, calculating guardian named Justice. I drove home practicing my lines. I practiced shaking my hands. I practiced looking confused. I had to become the very thing they mocked. I had to become the helpless old man. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the flickering light of the television in the living room. They were in there, probably planning their trip to Bali, probably spending money they didn't have. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I mussed up my hair. I let my shoulders slump. I relaxed my facial muscles until I looked 10 years older. It is showtime, Jerry, I whispered to myself. I opened the car door and stepped out into the night, ready to play the greatest and most terrible role of my life. The wolf was at the door, but the sheep inside were too busy counting their wool to notice. They had no idea that the man walking up the driveway wasn't their victim anymore. He was their executioner, and the execution was scheduled to begin right after breakfast. The drive back from Penny's office felt like the longest commute of my life. The windshield wipers slashed back and forth in a hypnotic rhythm, counting down the seconds until I had to step onto the stage. I pulled my sedan into the driveway and killed the engine, but I did not get out immediately. I sat there in the dark, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. This was it. The moment of transformation. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. The eyes staring back were too sharp, too angry. They were the eyes of a man who had just seen his son-in-law betray him on video. They were the eyes of a structural engineer who had found a fatal crack in the foundation. I had to hide them. I reached up and messed up my hair, pulling a few strands out of place so I looked disheveled. I unbuttoned the top button of my shirt and loosened my collar, letting it hang slightly askew. I slumped my shoulders forward, compressing my chest to make myself look smaller and more frail. I practiced a tremor in my right hand, staring at it until the shaking looked involuntary. I had to become the very thing they mocked. I had to become the ghost they claimed I was. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of wet pine and old leather, and exhaled the rage. I pushed it down deep into the pit of my stomach where it burned like a coal. Then I opened the car door and shuffled toward the house, not as Jerry the Avenger, but as Jerry the confused old man. When I opened the front door, the house was silent. The only light came from the massive flat-screen television in the living room, casting a flickering blue glow over the furniture. Brittany and Travis were sitting on the sofa. They were not speaking to each other. Suitcases were open on the floor, half-packed. When I walked in, they both looked up. Their expressions were a mixture of defensiveness and hostility. They were expecting a fight. They were expecting the angry father who had yelled at them in the kitchen this morning. They were ready for war. I stopped in the hallway and let my gaze drift around the room as if I was having trouble recognizing where I was. I blinked rapidly and let my mouth hang open just a fraction. "Is it raining?" I asked, my voice wavering slightly. "It sounds like rain." Brittany frowned. She exchanged a confused look with Travis. "Yes, Dad, it is raining. It has been raining all day." "Where have you been?" I took a few unsteady steps into the living room. I rubbed my forehead as if I had a headache. "I went for a drive," I said softly. "I think I went for a drive. I wanted to get something, but I forgot what it was." Travis sat up straighter. His eyes narrowed. He was analyzing me, looking for a trap. "You left in a hurry, Jerry. You were screaming at us. You told us to get out. Remember?" I paused. I let a look of genuine confusion wash over my face. I tilted my head to the side. "I told you to get out," I asked. "Why would I do that?" "You are family." Travis looked at Brittany and whispered loud enough for me to hear. "See? I told you. He is losing it." Brittany stood up and walked over to me. Her face softened, not out of kindness but out of pity mixed with relief. She was realizing that she might not be in trouble after all. "Dad," she said slowly, using that condescending tone people use with children. "You were upset about Mom's necklace. Remember, you were yelling about the pawn shop." I blinked again. "The necklace." "Yes, the necklace." I let my shoulders sag even further. I looked down at my shoes. "Oh yes," I said. "I remember being sad. I miss your mother so much, Brittany. Sometimes I get confused. The days all bleed together since she left. I went to the store, I think. Or maybe the park. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." I reached into my jacket pocket. My hand was shaking visibly now. I pulled out a thick white envelope. This was the bait. I had stopped at the bank before coming home and withdrawn $2,000 from my emergency personal account. It was painful to give this money to the people who were stealing from me, but I knew I had to make an investment to sell the lie. I walked over to the coffee table and placed the envelope down next to their passports. "I am sorry if I yelled," I said, keeping my eyes on the floor. "I don't want to be a burden. I know I am difficult. I know I am just a grumpy old man. I want you to have a good trip. You deserve a vacation." Travis reached out and picked up the envelope. He opened the flap and peered inside. His eyes widened when he saw the stack of $100 bills. The suspicion on his face evaporated instantly, replaced by pure greed. He looked at me and for the first time in years, he smiled. It was a shark's smile. "Wow, Jerry," he said, his tone shifting from aggressive to sickly sweet. This is really generous of you." I forced a weak smile. "I just want you to be happy. I know things are tight. I heard you talking about the deposit. Please take it. Consider it an apology for my memory lapses." Brittany walked over and hugged me. It was a stiff hug. She patted my back awkwardly. "Thanks, Dad," she said. "We really appreciate it. We were really worried about you earlier. You were acting so strange. But we forgive you. We forgive you." The audacity of those 3 words almost made me break character. They forgave me. They forgave me for getting angry that they sold my dead wife's heirloom. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake them. But I held still. I stood there in her arms and played the part of the frail father. "You are good kids," I lied, my voice cracking. "I am lucky to have you. I don't know what I would do without you." Travis was already counting the money. He licked his thumb and flipped through the bills. 20, 21, 22. All there. "You know, Jerry," Travis said, sliding the money into his pocket. "Maybe you should rest while we are gone. You seem tired. We will only be gone a week. You will be okay here by yourself, right?" I nodded vigorously. "Oh yes, I will be fine. I will just read my books and water the plants. I probably won't even leave the house." "Perfect," Brittany said. She looked at Travis and winked. "See, babe." Everything worked out. They went back to packing, their mood completely transformed. They were laughing now, making jokes about the cocktails they were going to drink in Bali. They talked about the beach club and the villa they were going to rent. They completely ignored me standing there in the middle of the room. I had become furniture again. I had become the invisible checkbook. I watched them for a moment longer, engraving this image into my mind. I needed to remember their arrogance. I needed to remember how easily they took my money and dismissed my existence. They thought they had won the lottery. They had a senile father who gave them cash whenever he got confused. They thought they had the perfect victim. "I am going to bed now," I mumbled, turning toward the stairs. "My head hurts." "Okay, Dad. Sleep tight," Brittany called out without looking up. "Don't forget to take your pills." I walked up the stairs, slowly gripping the banister with both hands, hauling my weight up one step at a time. I made sure to let my feet drag on the carpet so they could hear the heavy, clumsy footsteps of an old man. But the moment I reached the landing and turned the corner out of their sight, I straightened my spine. I walked to my bedroom door and closed it softly. I locked it. Then I walked to the window and looked down at the driveway where Travis's Mercedes was parked. My hands stopped shaking. My shoulders squared. The fog in my eyes cleared. "Enjoy your flight," I whispered to the empty room. "Because when you land, you won't have a home to come back to." I sat down at my desk and pulled a notebook from the drawer. I opened it to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote one word: timeline. I began to map out the next 48 hours. I needed to coordinate the locksmith. I needed to time the call to the credit card companies to ensure the decline happened exactly when they were checking in. I needed to draft the email to the private lender regarding the cabin. Downstairs, I could hear the muted sounds of their celebration. They were probably toasting with my wine. Let them toast. Let them drink to their good fortune. They were celebrating the harvest while standing in the path of a tornado. I undressed and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I touched the locket which I had hidden under my pillow. I could feel the hum of the SD card inside. Catherine was right. They were monsters. But she was wrong about one thing. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to dismantle them. As I drifted off to sleep listening to the rain, I didn't feel old. I didn't feel confused. I felt dangerous. The sheep had shed its wool, and underneath was pure iron. Tomorrow the trap would be set, and in 2 days the jaws would snap shut. The morning of their departure arrived with a chaotic energy that vibrated through the silent halls of my home. Outside, the gray Seattle sky was heavy with unfallen rain, but inside the air was thick with the smell of expensive luggage leather and the sweet, cloying scent of my daughter's perfume. I sat at the kitchen island, nursing a mug of black coffee that had gone cold in my hands. My fingers were wrapped around the ceramics so tightly that my knuckles were white, but I kept my posture slumped, my head bowed. To them, I was just part of the scenery, a decaying fixture in the house they already considered theirs. I was waiting. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs like a war drum. Thump, thump, thump. I was an engineer, and I knew that in any demolition, the most critical moment is not the explosion itself, but the placement of the charges. And the charge was about to be set. Travis entered the kitchen like a whirlwind. He was wearing a floral shirt that was far too bright for the weather and sunglasses pushed up into his gelled hair. He looked like a man who had already won the lottery. He was humming a tune, tapping his fingers on the marble countertop. He didn't look at me. He just walked past me to the refrigerator grabbing a bottle of water. But I knew he was working up to something. I could feel his eyes darting toward me when he thought I wasn't looking. He had the nervous energy of a pickpocket. Finally, he stopped. He pulled a sleek blue folder from his carry-on bag. He walked over to the island and slid it across the marble until it rested just inches from my elbow. The sound of the paper sliding against the stone was like a hiss. "Hey, Jerry," he said, his voice pitched high with fake cheerfulness. "Before we head to the airport, we need to handle one little administrative thing. Just some boring paperwork for your insurance." I looked up slowly, blinking behind my glasses. I let my mouth hang open slightly, a look of vacant confusion that I had perfected over the last 48 hours. "Insurance?" I asked, my voice raspy. I thought I already had insurance. Catherine handled that." Travis sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. He leaned in, resting his elbows on the counter, invading my personal space. He smelled of mint gum and greed. "Yeah, Jerry, but since Catherine is gone, the policy needs to be updated. It is just a formality. It basically says that if anything happens to you while we are in Bali, like if you fall or get sick, the doctors can talk to us. You want us to be able to help you, right?" He flipped the folder open. There it was. The document. At the top in bold letters it said, "General Durable Power of Attorney." But underneath in the fine print, which he knew I wouldn't read it, granted him unrestricted access to my bank accounts, my real estate, and my investment portfolio. It was a license to steal everything I had built over 40 years. He handed me a pen. "Just sign right there at the bottom," he said, tapping the X. "Then we can go and you can get some rest." I took the pen. My hand was trembling. This time I didn't have to fake it. The adrenaline flooding my system was so potent, it made my vision blur. This was the fulcrum point. If I signed this document as it was, I would die penniless. If I refused, he would get suspicious and the trap would fail. I had to execute the maneuver perfectly. I looked at the document. Then I looked at my coffee mug. It was sitting just to the right of the paper. I don't have my reading glasses," I mumbled, patting my chest pocket. "You don't need them, Jerry," Travis said, pushing the paper closer. "It is standard stuff, Penny, your lawyer sent it over. That was a lie. Penny had drafted the decoy document, but she had certainly not sent this one. This was something he had downloaded from the internet and printed out. I reached for the pen with my right hand and simultaneously reached for the coffee mug with my left, pretending to steady myself. This was it. The structural failure. I allowed my left hand to spasm. Just a jerk of the wrist. It was a calculated movement, precise and sharp. My hand struck the mug. The ceramic tipped. The dark brown liquid surged over the rim like a tidal wave. It splashed across the counter, soaking the edge of the folder and pooling rapidly toward the document. "Oh no!" I cried out, dropping the pen. "I am sorry. I am so clumsy." Travis jumped back, cursing loudly. "Damn it, Jerry, watch what you are doing!" He grabbed the folder, pulling it out of the puddle, but the bottom edge was already soaked. He looked at it with disgust. "Look at this," he snapped. "You ruined it. Now I have to print another one. We are going to be late." He turned his back to me, grabbing a roll of paper towels from the holder near the sink. He started scrubbing the counter furiously, muttering about how I should be in a home. This was the moment. The window of opportunity was 3 seconds, maybe 4. Travis was turned away, aggressively wiping the marble. His focus was on the mess, not on me. I reached into the inside pocket of my cardigan. My hand moved with the speed of a magician. I pulled out the document Penny and I had prepared. It was formatted exactly like his, same font, same layout, same weight of paper. But the title didn't say Power of Attorney. It said Promissory Note and Confession of Judgment. It was a legal admission that Travis owed me $200,000 payable, immediately secured by all his future assets and income. I slid the wet, ruined document off the counter and dropped it onto the floor, kicking it under the lip of the island with my slipper. In the same motion, I placed the new document on the counter, right where the old one had been. I even splashed a few drops of coffee onto the corner of the new paper to sell the illusion. It took 2 seconds. Travis turned back around, throwing the wet paper towels into the trash. He was red in the face. "Okay," he huffed. "Okay. It is fine. The signature line is dry. Just sign the damn thing, Jerry, so we can leave." He looked at the paper. He saw the coffee stain on the corner. He saw the layout he recognized. He didn't read the text. Why would he read it? He thought he was the one in control. He thought he was dealing with a senile old man who couldn't even hold a cup of coffee. His arrogance was his blindfold. I picked up the pen again. I made sure my hand was shaking violently. "I am sorry, Travis," I whined. I am so sorry." "Just sign it," he commanded, pointing at the line. I lowered the pen. The tip touched the paper. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears like the roar of a waterfall. I was about to own him. I was about to put a chain around his neck that he would never take off. I scribbled my signature. Gerald Patton. There I said, looking up at him with wide, watery eyes. "Is that okay?" Travis snatched the paper away. He glanced at the signature to make sure it was legible. He didn't look at the title. He didn't look at the clauses. He folded it quickly and shoved it into his bag. "Perfect," he said. His voice was breathless. He thought he had just stolen $1 million. He had no idea he had just signed his life away. Brittany walked in from the hallway dragging a Louis Vuitton suitcase. She looked at the wet counter and then at me. "What happened?" she asked. "Your dad made a mess," Travis said, buttoning his bag. "But we got it sorted. We are good to go." He looked at me and winked. A conspiratorial wink. "Take care of the house, Jerry. Don't burn it down." I watched them walk to the front door. The tension in my chest was so tight, it felt like a physical weight. I needed them to leave. I needed the door to close. Every second they stayed was a second where they might check the bag, where they might read the paper. I shuffled after them, playing the part until the very end. "Have fun," I called out. "Send me a postcard." Brittany didn't even turn around. She just waved a hand over her shoulder dismissively. "Bye, Dad." The heavy oak door slammed shut. The lock clicked. I stood there in the hallway, listening to the sound of the rain and the fading rumble of the taxi engine. Silence rushed back into the house, filling the space they had left behind. I didn't move for a long time. I just breathed, in and out. I felt the tremors in my hands stop. I felt my posture straighten. I felt the fog of the act lift from my mind. I walked back to the kitchen. I bent down and retrieved the soggy power of attorney document from under the island. I looked at it. The paper was ruined, stained brown, and crinkled. It was trash, just like their plan. I walked over to the trash can and dropped it in. Then I picked up the sponge and wiped the remaining coffee from the counter. I wiped it clean. I wiped it until the marble shone under the kitchen lights. "It is done," I said to the empty room. My voice was strong. It was deep. It was the voice of the man Catherine had married, not the shell they thought I was. I went to the refrigerator and poured the rest of the cold coffee down the drain. Then I walked to the liquor cabinet and poured myself a single glass of aged scotch. I held it up to the light, toasting the empty air. To Bali I whispered, "I hope you enjoy the flight, because the turbulence is just beginning." I took a sip. The liquid burned pleasantly in my throat. I walked to the window and watched the rain fall. The trap was sprung. The document was signed. Now all I had to do was wait for the credit card machines in Indonesia to decline. I checked my watch. The flight was 12 hours. 12 hours of peace before the storm. I intended to enjoy every single minute of it. I sat in my leather armchair in the study with my iPad resting on my knees. On the screen, a small white airplane icon was inching slowly across the blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Flight 812 bound for Denpasar, with a layover in Singapore. They were 30,000 feet in the air, trapped in a metal tube with no internet access and no way to turn back. They were drinking champagne and reclining in business-class seats that I had paid for, blissfully unaware that the ground beneath them had already disappeared. I took a sip of my scotch and set the glass down. The time for acting was over. The time for demolition had begun. I picked up the landline. My first call was not to the bank, but to a man named Mike, who ran a high-end security firm downtown. I had worked with Mike on several commercial building projects back in the day. He knew I didn't make frivolous calls. When he answered, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I told him I needed a full perimeter lockdown, and I needed it done within the hour. I told him I wanted the old tumblers drilled out. I wanted biometric deadbolts on every exterior door. I wanted cameras installed in the hallway, the living room, and the kitchen. I wanted a system so secure that not even a ghost could float through the walls without triggering a silent alarm. Mike arrived in 20 minutes with a van full of equipment and two guys who looked like they ate concrete for breakfast. I watched with a profound sense of satisfaction as the old brass lock on the front door, the lock that Brittany had used to barge in whenever she wanted money, was ripped from the wood. The sound of the drill screaming into the door frame was better than any symphony I had ever heard. It was the sound of boundaries being re-established. It was the sound of my life becoming mine again. When they were finished, I placed my thumb on the new scanner. The bolt slid home with a heavy, authoritative thud. Click. Locked. The keys Brittany and Travis carried in their pockets, the keys they guarded so jealously, were now nothing more than jagged pieces of useless scrap metal. While Mike's team was finishing up the cameras, I moved to the second phase of the operation, the financial severing. I sat at my mahogany desk and dialed the private wealth management line at my bank. I had been a client there for 40 years. I knew the branch manager well, but I didn't ask for him. I asked for the fraud department. "This is Gerald Patton," I said, my voice crisp and commanding, devoid of the tremor I had feigned earlier. "Authorization code 77 Echo Bravo." There was a pause as the operator verified my identity. "Mr. Patton, good afternoon. How can we assist you today?" I took a deep breath. "I need to report a security breach. I believe my financial information has been compromised by family members who have been coercing me. I need to execute a total freeze on all accounts immediately." The operator's tone shifted instantly to professional urgency. "We can certainly do that, sir. Which accounts specifically?" "All of them," I said. "I want to cancel the supplementary platinum cards issued to Brittany Patton and Travis Moore. I want them reported as stolen. I want the joint checking account I share with my daughter closed and the remaining funds transferred to my primary savings. And most importantly, I want you to place a high-level travel alert on my credit file." "A travel alert, sir?" "Yes," I said, leaning back in my chair. "If any transactions attempt to process from Indonesia, specifically Bali, I want them flagged as high-risk fraud and declined immediately. Do not call to verify. Just decline." I could almost hear the keystrokes on the other end, severing the digital lifelines that connected my wallet to their appetites. "It is done, Mr. Patton," the operator said. "The cards are dead. The accounts are frozen. Is there anything else?" "Yes," I added. "One more thing. There is a standing authorization for automatic mortgage payments on a property in Lake Chelan. Cancel it." "But sir, if you cancel the payment, the loan will go into default." "I know," I said, smiling at the empty room. "That is exactly what I want. Let it default. Let the lender panic. Let them start looking for the borrowers." I hung up the phone. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with power. I walked out of the study and climbed the stairs to the second floor. I stood outside the guest suite where Brittany and Travis had been living for the past 3 years. The door was open. The room was a mess. Clothes were piled on the floor. Empty water bottles littered the nightstands. It smelled of their entitlement. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel nostalgia. I felt the cold efficiency of a landlord evicting a bad tenant. I went to the garage and grabbed a roll of heavy-duty black garbage bags. I returned to the room and began to work. I didn't pack their things nicely. I didn't fold their clothes. I swept everything off the dressers into the bags. Makeup bottles, expensive colognes, phone chargers, shoes. It all went in. I stripped the sheets off the bed, the sheets my wife had bought for them, and threw them in the trash. I was scrubbing their essence out of my house. I dragged the bags, 4 of them bulging and heavy, down the stairs and out to the curb. I didn't care if it rained on them. In fact, I hoped it would. Then I made the final call. The call that would seal their fate legally. I dialed the non-emergency line of the local police precinct. "This is Gerald Patton at 42 Evergreen Terrace," I said. "I am notifying you that I have revoked the guest privileges of 2 individuals, Brittany Patton and Travis Moore. They do not have a lease, they do not pay rent. They are no longer welcome on the premises. I have changed the locks. If they attempt to enter the property, when they return, I want it on record that they are trespassing." "I understand, sir," the dispatcher said. "We will log the notice in the system." I hung up. It was finished. The house was a fortress. The bank was a vault. And the law was a shield. I walked to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. It was a simple meal, ham and cheese on rye, but it tasted better than any 5-star dinner I had eaten in years. It tasted like freedom. I ate standing up, looking out the window at the rain washing over the driveway. I imagined them landing in Bali. I imagined Travis walking up to the rental car counter, his chest puffed out, handing over that platinum card with my name on it. I imagined the clerk swiping it. I imagined the frown. I imagined the words, "I am sorry, sir, this card has been reported stolen." I laughed out loud. A single sharp bark of laughter that echoed in the empty kitchen. They wanted a vacation. I was giving them one. A vacation from my money. A vacation from my protection. A vacation from the reality they had been avoiding their whole lives. I checked the iPad again. The plane was halfway over the ocean now. They were sleeping, probably dreaming of beaches and cocktails. "Sleep well, children," I whispered. "Because when you wake up, the nightmare begins." I turned off the lights downstairs one by one, leaving the house in darkness, save for the blinking red light of the new security system. A unblinking red eye, watching, waiting, daring them to come back. I went upstairs to my master bedroom, the room I used to share with Catherine. I placed the locket on the nightstand next to me. "We did it, Cat," I said to the gold heart. "Step 1 is complete. The bank of Dad is permanently closed." I lay down and closed my eyes. For the first time in a year, I didn't need a sleeping pill. The sound of the rain against the new biometric locks was the only lullaby I needed. Tomorrow I would wake up and start designing my new life. But for tonight, I rested in the calm eye of the storm I had just created. It was 2 a.m. in Seattle when the notification lit up my iPad screen. The glow was the only light in my dark bedroom, a digital beacon signaling that the trap had officially snapped shut. I was wide awake, sitting up in bed with a glass of water on the nightstand and the ghost of a smile on my lips. The alert was from my bank's fraud detection system. It read simply, "Transaction declined. Location Nusa Dua, Bali. Merchant, the Royal Azure Resort. Amount $5,400. Attempted on Platinum Visa, ending in 4098. I swiped the notification away, not to dismiss it, but to savor it. I could see the scene unfolding in my mind, as clearly as if I were standing right there in the humid, tropical air. I knew exactly how it was playing out. Brittany and Travis had just stepped off a 20-hour journey. They would be exhausted, sweating in their designer clothes, smelling of recycled airplane air and desperation. They would have walked into that marble lobby with its high ceilings and orchid arrangements, feeling like royalty. Travis would have marched up to the front desk, his chest puffed out, ready to assert his dominance over the local staff. He would have slapped that heavy metal credit card down on the counter, not even looking the receptionist in the eye. "Check in for more," he would have said. "Ocean View Suite." I imagined the receptionist smiling politely, inserting the chip, waiting for the machine to beep. I imagined Travis tapping his foot, checking his watch, annoyed that it was taking 10 seconds too long. And then the silence. That terrible, awkward silence when the machine spits out a little slip of paper that says, "Do not honor." I checked the time. It had been 3 minutes since the decline. Right on cue, my cell phone on the nightstand began to vibrate. It buzzed angrily against the wood, dancing toward the edge of the table. The caller ID flashed a photo of Brittany, a photo taken years ago when she still knew how to smile without looking at a camera lens. I let it ring. I took a sip of water. I let it go to voicemail. 1 minute later, it rang again. This time it was Travis. I let that go to voicemail too. I wanted them to marinate in the panic. I wanted them to feel the heat of the eyes of the people standing in line behind them. I wanted them to feel the weight of their luggage, which suddenly wasn't a symbol of their status, but an anchor dragging them down. When the phone rang a third time, I decided it was time to play my part. I cleared my throat, adjusting my pitch to that wavering, confused tone I had perfected. I answered on the 4th ring, just as it was about to cut off. "Hello," I mumbled, sounding like I had just been woken from a deep, confused sleep. "Who is this?" "Jerry, it is Travis." Travis' voice was a shriek. It was high-pitched and laced with hysteria. "Listen to me. There is something wrong with the card. You need to call the bank right now." I paused. I could hear the background noise on his end. The murmur of a busy hotel lobby. The clacking of keyboards. A woman's voice over a PA system. "Travis," I asked slowly. "Travis who?" "It is the middle of the night." "Why are you calling me?" "Travis Moore." Your son-in-law, stop playing around. Jerry, we are at the hotel and the card is being declined. The lady says it is reported stolen. You need to call them and authorize the charge. Tell them it is us. I let out a long, groaning sigh, the sound of an old man who doesn't understand what is happening. Hotel, I asked. What hotel? Are you in Seattle? No. We are in Bali, remember. You gave us the money, you signed the papers. Jerry, wake up. We are standing at the front desk and we look like idiots. Fix this. I could hear Brittany in the background crying. She was saying, tell him to hurry up. Everyone is staring at us. I don't understand. I said, my voice trembling. I don't have a son-in-law named Travis. My daughter is... Wait, where is Catherine? Catherine handles the bills. Let me put Catherine on the phone. There was a silence on the other end that was absolute. It was the silence of pure horror. For a second, Travis forgot about the money. For a second, he actually believed that my mind had completely snapped, that I had reverted to a time before my wife died. Jerry, stop it, Travis hissed, but his voice had lost its edge. It was trembling now. Catherine is dead. You know that. Just call the bank, please. They are going to kick us out. I laughed. It was a soft, vacant chuckle. Dead? No, she is not. She is right here. She is in the kitchen making coffee. I can smell it. Then I hardened my voice just a fraction enough to be heard, but not enough to break character. I think you have the wrong number, stranger. I don't know who you are, but you shouldn't be trying to scam old people. It is not nice. My daughter is a good girl. She is upstairs, asleep in her room. She would never go to Bali without telling me. Dad, I heard Brittany scream from the background. Dad. It is me, it is Brittany. I pulled the phone away from my ear as if the noise hurt. I am hanging up now, I said. Do not call here again or I will call the police. My wife doesn't like it when the phone rings late at night. I pressed the red button ending the call. I sat there in the darkness, my heart rate steady, my breathing calm. I could only imagine the scene in that lobby now. The receptionist would be asking for another form of payment. Travis would be patting his pockets, pulling out his own cards, cards that were maxed out, cards that had been declining for months, which was why they needed mine in the first place. Brittany would be sobbing, her mascara running down her face, realizing that her Instagram perfect arrival had turned into a public humiliation. They had no cash. I knew this because Travis never carried cash. He thought it was beneath him. They had no working credit cards because I had frozen the supplementals. They were 10,000 miles from home in a foreign country with no way to pay for a taxi, let alone a 5-star suite. My iPad lit up again. Another notification. Transaction declined. Amount $50. Merchant grabbed taxi. They were trying to leave. They were trying to flee the scene of their embarrassment, probably trying to get to a cheaper hotel or a hostel. But even the rideshare app was linked to the card I had killed. They were stranded on the curb. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but it wasn't the frantic energy of fear. It was the cold burn of justice. For a year, I had felt helpless. For a year, I had let them dictate my reality, telling me I was useless, telling me I was a burden. Tonight, I had reminded them who held the keys to the kingdom. I lay back down, pulling the duvet up to my chin. I knew they would try to call again. I turned the phone off completely. Let them scream into the void. Let them figure it out. They were young. They were smart. They were entrepreneurs, right? Surely they could figure out how to survive a night in paradise without my wallet. As I drifted back to sleep, I thought about the necklace. I thought about the secret compartment. Catherine had warned me. She had told me to watch them. Well, I was watching them now. I was watching them fall. And the view was spectacular. Tomorrow, when they finally managed to scrape together enough coins to call me from a payphone or borrow a stranger's Wi-Fi, would be ready for the next phase. But for now, I let the silence of the house wrap around me like a shield. They were on the other side of the world, and for the first time in a long time, I was completely and utterly free. It took them 40 hours to get back from paradise. 40 hours of humiliation. I later learned from the credit card statements, or rather the lack of them, that Travis had to sell his prized Rolex to a street vendor in Denpasar just to buy 2 one-way economy tickets home. They arrived at my doorstep at 3 in the morning, in the middle of a torrential downpour that felt like a baptism of misery. I was awake. I had been waiting for this moment, like a director waiting for the curtain to rise on the final act. I sat in the darkened living room, illuminated only by the glow of the security monitors. I held a warm cup of herbal tea in my hands, feeling the steam rise against my face while on the screen outside, 2 soaking wet rats were about to realize the ship had already sailed. A yellow taxi idled at the curb just long enough to dump their luggage onto the wet pavement before screeching away. They didn't even have an umbrella. I watched Brittany shiver her designer sundress, clinging to her skin, completely inappropriate for the cold Seattle night. Travis looked even worse. His floral shirt was stained with sweat and travel grime, and his hair, usually gelled to perfection, was plastered to his skull. They dragged their suitcases up the driveway, slipping on the wet concrete. They looked like refugees from a failed life, which in a way they were. Travis marched up to the front door, aggressive and entitled as always. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his key ring. I watched on the high-definition monitor as he jammed his key into the lock. Or rather, tried to. The new biometric deadbolt I had installed didn't even have a keyhole in the traditional sense. It was a solid block of reinforced steel that required a fingerprint or a code, neither of which he had. He shoved the key against the metal, scratching the finish. He cursed. He tried again. Then he stepped back and looked at the door as if it were an alien artifact. "It is not working," he shouted over the sound of the rain. "The keyhole is gone." Brittany pushed him aside. "Let me try." She started pounding on the door with her fist. The sound echoed through the house as a dull thudding that vibrated in the floorboards beneath my feet. "Dad," she screamed. "Dad, open the door. It is freezing out here. Open up." I took a sip of my tea. The chamomile was soothing. I didn't move. I didn't turn on the porch light. I let them stand in the darkness. Travis lost his temper. He started kicking the door with his expensive loafers, leaving muddy scuff marks on the fresh paint. "Open the damn door, Jerry. I know you are in there. You think this is funny. You are going to pay for this." The noise was tremendous. It was the sound of desperation. And just as I had calculated, it was loud enough to wake the neighborhood. Across the street, I saw the porch light of Mrs. Higgins' house flick on. Mrs. Higgins was 80 years old, the head of the neighborhood watch, and she had the hearing of a bat. She stepped out onto her porch, clutching her robe tight around her. "Hey!" she yelled, her voice cracking like a whip. "You there! Stop that racket!" "It is 3 in the morning, Travis spun around, wild-eyed. "Mind your own business, you old hag. We live here." "You do not live here," Mrs. Higgins shouted back. "I know Jerry. Jerry is a gentleman. You look like hoodlums. I am calling the cops. Go ahead," Travis screamed. "Call them. This is my house." I smiled. Travis had just walked right into the second trap. He was so arrogant he actually believed the law was on his side. He didn't know that I had already filed the trespassing notice. He didn't know that legally he was a stranger. I watched the monitor. Brittany was crying now, leaning against the doorframe, sliding down until she was sitting in a puddle. She looked small. For a second, a brief, fleeting second, I felt a twinge of pity. But then I remembered the pawn shop. I remembered her selling her mother's memory for a tan. The pity evaporated like mist. 5 minutes later, the blue and red strobe lights of a patrol car cut through the darkness, bouncing off the wet trees. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts. One of them was Officer Miller, a man I had met at the community barbecue last summer. He walked up the driveway, his flashlight cutting a beam through the rain. "Step away from the door," he commanded, his voice authoritative and calm. Travis threw his hands up. "Thank God you are here. You have to help us." My father-in-law has locked us out. He is having a mental breakdown. He trapped us outside in the rain. Officer Miller didn't lower his flashlight. He shone it right in Travis's face, forcing him to squint. Names, he asked. Travis Moore and Brittany Patton. We live here. This is our residence. We demand you force him to open the door. I put my teacup down. It was time for my cameo. I walked to the front door and opened it just a crack, leaving the security chain fastened. The cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and their fear. Officer Miller, I said, my voice steady and sane. Thank you for coming so quickly. Jerry Travis lunged forward, but the officer stepped in between us, his hand moving to his taser. Back off, sir, the officer barked. Officer! I continued ignoring Travis completely. These individuals are trespassing. I filed a report yesterday. They do not live here. They are not welcome here. That is a lie. Travis screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. We have lived here for 3 years. My mail comes here. Officer Miller looked at Travis. Let me see your ID. Travis fumbled in his wet pocket, pulling out his wallet with shaking hands. He handed over his driver's license. The officer took it and shone his light on the plastic card. He scrutinized it for a long moment. Then he looked back at Travis with a flat, unimpressed expression. Sir, this license lists your address as a P.O. box on Main Street. Travis froze. I saw the color drain from his face. He had changed his address 6 months ago to hide from the debt collectors so they couldn't serve him papers at my house. He thought he was being clever, avoiding the consequences of his bad loans. Now that cleverness was the noose around his neck. I use that for work, Travis stammered. But I physically live here, ask anyone. Does your name appear on the deed? The officer asked. No, but is there a lease agreement signed by the homeowner? No, we are family, Officer. Miller handed the license back. Sir, under Washington state law, if you do not have proof of residency and the homeowner has revoked your guest privileges, you are trespassing. Mr. Patton has formally requested your removal. You need to leave the premises immediately. But we have nowhere to go, Brittany wailed, standing up and grabbing the officer's arm. Our clothes are inside. All our stuff is inside. I pointed a finger toward the curb, where 4 sodden black garbage bags sat in a pile looking like trash waiting for pickup. Your belongings are right there, I said coldly. I packed them myself. Anything you left behind will be donated to charity in the morning. Brittany looked at the bags, then at me. Her eyes were wide with shock. She had never seen me like this. She had never seen the engineer. She had only ever seen the dad. Dad, please, she whispered. It is raining. We have no money. I looked at her. I looked at the daughter who had called me a burden. I looked at the daughter who had laughed while I panicked about the necklace. You should have thought about that before you booked the trip, I said. I closed the door. I slid the deadbolt home. I listened through the wood. I heard Travis screaming obscenities. I heard the officer's voice drop an octave, giving a final warning. Sir, if you do not grab your bags and vacate this property in 30 seconds, I will arrest you for disorderly conduct and trespassing. Do not test me. There was a scuffle of feet. The sound of wet plastic bags being dragged across concrete. The sound of a car door slamming. And then silence. I walked back to the living room and watched the monitor. The police car pulled away. The taxi was long gone. I saw 2 figures dragging heavy trash bags down the street, walking into the darkness toward the bus stop 3 miles away. They were soaked. They were broke. And for the first time in their adult lives, they were completely on their own. I didn't feel happy. Happiness wasn't the right word. I felt balanced. The equation had been corrected. The load had been redistributed. I picked up my tea, which had gone cold, and poured it into the sink. Then I went upstairs to bed. I had a busy day tomorrow. I had a meeting with the bank manager and a court date to prepare for. But tonight I would sleep. I would sleep the deep, restful sleep of a man who had finally taken out the trash. The morning sun broke over Seattle with a crisp brilliance that mocked the misery of the two people standing outside the First National Bank. I was already inside, sitting comfortably in the private office of the branch manager, Robert Henderson, who had been my trusted financial advisor for 20 years. We were watching the lobby security feed on a large monitor, sipping hot espresso. Robert looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. He asked me if I was sure I wanted to do this. I told him that I had never been more sure of anything in my life. I told him that surgery is painful, but sometimes you have to cut deep to remove the infection. And right on cue, the infection walked through the revolving doors. Travis and Brittany looked like ghosts. They were wearing the same clothes they had worn yesterday, clothes that were now wrinkled, stained, and damp from their night on the streets. I assumed they had spent the night in a 24-hour diner, or perhaps the bus terminal. Brittany's eyes were swollen red puffiness standing out against her pale face. Her hair, usually a pristine curtain of blonde, was a tangled mess. Travis looked frantic. His eyes darted around the lobby with the desperate energy of a cornered animal. He was clutching his leather bag to his chest, the bag that contained the document he believed was his salvation. They marched straight to the teller line. I turned up the volume on the monitor. I wanted to hear every word. I wanted to witness the moment their reality finally shattered. "I need to make a withdrawal," Travis barked at the young teller. "A large one. Immediately." The teller, a young woman named Sarah, looked at him with polite caution. "Do you have an account with us, sir?" Travis slammed his hand on the counter. "Number. My father-in-law does. Gerald Patton. I have power of attorney. I need to access his primary savings and the trust fund. Now." Sarah typed something into her computer. Her brow furrowed. "I see a flag on this account, sir. I am going to need you to speak with the manager. Please take a seat." Travis huffed, running a hand through his greasy hair. "I don't have time to sit. Just give me the money. We have a flight to catch." He was lying, of course. They had missed their flight to Bali days ago. He just wanted cash to survive. He wanted cash to book a hotel room and pretend that he wasn't a homeless fraud. Robert stood up from his desk in the office where I was hiding. He buttoned his suit jacket. "That is my cue," he said. I watched through the blinds as Robert walked out into the lobby. He approached them with the calm, professional demeanor of an undertaker. "Mr. Moore," he said, "I am Robert Henderson, the branch manager. Please come with me to my desk." Travis grabbed Brittany's arm and dragged her along. She looked shell-shocked, like she was walking to the gallows without knowing why. They sat down at Robert's desk out in the open lobby. I had specifically asked Robert not to bring them into the private office. I didn't want to smell them. I didn't want to be in the same room. I just wanted to watch. Travis wasted no time. He reached into his bag and pulled out the document. The paper was crinkled and stained with coffee from the incident in my kitchen. He smoothed it out on the desk, his fingers shaking. "Here it is," Travis said, pushing the paper toward Robert. "General power of attorney. Signed by Gerald Patton 2 days ago. It gives me full control over his assets. I want to withdraw $50,000 in cash, and I want to transfer the rest to an account I will provide." Robert put on his reading glasses. He picked up the document. He took his time. He read the first page. He flipped to the second page. The silence stretched out tight as a piano wire. Brittany was gnawing on her fingernail, a habit she had quit when she was 12. Travis was tapping his foot so hard the desk was vibrating. "Well," Travis demanded, "it is legal. I watched him sign it." Robert lowered the paper. He looked at Travis over the rim of his glasses. His expression was not one of compliance. It was one of confusion mixed with professional pity. "Mr. Moore," Robert said softly, "did you actually read this document before you brought it in here?" Travis scoffed. "Of course I read it. It is a standard power of attorney. My lawyer drafted it." Robert shook his head slowly. No, sir. That is not what this is. He turned the document around and pointed to the header, the bold text that Travis had been too arrogant and too hurried to read when I spilled the coffee. This document is titled Promissory Note and Confession of Judgment. Robert read aloud. By signing this, you, Mr. Travis Moore, acknowledge a debt of $200,000 owed to Mr. Gerald Patton, payable immediately. You also pledge all current and future assets as collateral, including your vehicle and any future wages. Travis froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was like watching a fish gasp for air on dry land. What Travis whispered. No, that is impossible. I printed it out. It was power of attorney. Robert pointed to the bottom of the page. Is this your signature? Travis stared at the ink. He stared at the coffee stain in the corner. He remembered the moment. He remembered the rush. He remembered the switch, although he hadn't realized it was a switch at the time. He tricked me, Travis screamed, standing up and knocking his chair over. The old bastard tricked me. He switched the papers. This is fraud. Robert remained seated, calm and immovable. Mr. Moore, I cannot speak to how this document was signed. I only know what is in front of me. This is a legal admission of debt. It does not give you access to Mr. Patton's money. In fact, it gives us the authority to garner your assets if Mr. Patton chooses to enforce it. Brittany made a sound like a wounded animal. She grabbed the paper from the desk, reading it frantically. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon, the clauses that bound them to poverty. You signed this, she shrieked, turning on Travis. You told me you read it. You told me we were safe. You signed away everything. Shut up, Brittany, Travis yelled back, his face turning purple. He set me up. Your father is crazy. Robert raised a hand, signaling for the security guard who was standing by the door. But there is one more thing, Mr. Moore, Robert said, his voice turning icy. Even if this document gave you power of attorney, there is no money for you to take. What do you mean? Travis asked, breathing hard. The trust fund. The accounts. There is millions in there? Robert opened a file folder on his desk. He pulled out a stack of bank statements highlighted in yellow. We have been conducting an internal audit since Mr. Patton called us yesterday. We found a series of unauthorized withdrawals from the family trust over the last 18 months. Digital transfers, checks written to shell companies that list you as the beneficiary. The total amount missing is $215,000. Robert looked Travis dead in the eye. That is embezzlement, Mr. Moore. It is a federal crime. We have already forwarded these findings to the district attorney. The air seemed to leave the room. The lobby went silent. Customers stopped what they were doing to watch the drama unfold. Brittany stood up slowly, backing away from Travis as if he were radioactive. You stole it, she whispered. Her voice was trembling with a mixture of horror and realization. You told me you were making money in real estate. You told me the trips, the clothes, the dinners were from your commissions. You were stealing from my dad. Travis laughed, a manic, broken sound. I did it for us, Brittany. You think you could live on my salary. You think you would be happy shopping at discount stores. You wanted the lifestyle. You wanted to be an influencer. I fed the beast. Don't put this on me, Brittany screamed, shoving him hard in the chest. You are a liar. You are a thief, and now we are homeless because of you. She looked at Robert, tears streaming down her face, making tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. Mr. Henderson, please. I didn't know. You have to believe me. I thought he was successful. Can I access my account? The joint account with my dad. I just need money for food. Robert shook his head sadly. I am sorry, Brittany. Your father closed that account yesterday. Your name has been removed from all banking privileges due to the security breach. You have zero balance. Brittany collapsed. She didn't faint. She just crumbled, sinking to the floor of the bank lobby, burying her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. It was a weeping of total defeat. The weeping of a child who realizes the safety net has been cut. Travis stood there alone, surrounded by the wreckage of his own greed. He looked at the security guard who was now approaching him, hand on his holster. He looked at Robert. Then he looked directly at the glass window of the private office. He couldn't see me through the blinds, but somehow he knew. He knew I was there watching him. "You win, Jerry!" He screamed at the glass, his voice cracking. "You win. Are you happy now?" Robert nodded to the guard. "Please escort Mr. Moore and Mrs. Moore off the property. If they return, call the police." The guard took Travis by the arm. Travis didn't fight. The fight had left him. He let himself be led away, dragging his feet. Brittany scrambled up, following them, still sobbing, trailing behind her husband, like a ghost of the woman she used to be. I watched them go through the revolving doors and out onto the street. They stood on the sidewalk, arguing. I saw Brittany throw her ring at him. I saw Travis throw his bag on the ground. They were tearing each other apart. The alliance of parasites had dissolved the moment the host stopped feeding them. I sat back in the leather chair and finished my espresso. It was cold, but it tasted like victory. Robert walked back into the office, closing the door softly behind him. "It is done, Jerry," he said. "The police are on their way to pick him up for questioning regarding the embezzlement." "Thank you, Robert," I said, standing up and buttoning my jacket. I looked at the monitor one last time. The sidewalk was empty. They were gone. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. For years, I had carried the weight of their expectations, their judgments, their needs. Now I was just carrying myself, and I was surprised to find that I was much stronger than I remembered. "I'm going to grab some lunch, Robert," I said. "I think I will have a steak. Rare." I walked out of the bank holding my head high. I didn't look at the spot on the floor where my daughter had cried. I walked past it. I had a court date to prepare for. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future. The demolition was complete. Now it was time to clear the rubble and build something new. The mediation room at the King County Superior Court was a windowless box designed to suck the emotion out of human conflict. The walls were painted a sterile beige, and the air conditioning hummed with a low, aggressive drone that made the silence feel heavy. I stood outside the heavy oak door, adjusting my tie in the reflection of the glass panel. For the past 3 days, I had worn the costume of a confused geriatric. I had slumped my shoulders. I had shuffled my feet. I had purposefully stained my shirts. But today, that man was gone. Today, I was wearing my charcoal gray 3-piece suit, the one I used to wear when presenting to the City Planning Commission. I was freshly shaved. My spine was straight. I felt like a coiled spring ready to release a lifetime of tension. Inside, I knew exactly what was happening. My lawyer, Penny Hart, had gone in 5 minutes early to set the stage. I could imagine Travis and Brittany sitting on the other side of the long mahogany table. They would be desperate. They had been homeless for 24 hours. They had no money, no change of clothes, and their arrogance had been replaced by a feral kind of panic. They were banking everything on this meeting. Their entire strategy rested on one simple lie: that Gerald Patton was mentally incompetent, that he had tricked them because he didn't know what he was doing, that the debt document was invalid because I lacked the capacity to execute a contract. I placed my hand on the brass handle. It was cool to the touch. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of floor wax and justice. Then I pushed the door open. The conversation inside stopped instantly. Travis was mid-sentence, leaning over the table with his hands clasped in a pleading gesture. He looked terrible. His floral shirt was wrinkled and buttoned wrong. He had dark circles under his eyes that looked like bruises. Brittany was slumped next to him, staring at the table, picking at a loose thread on her dress. When I walked in, they both looked up. Travis's mouth opened to speak, but the words died in his throat. He blinked. He was expecting the old man in the cardigan. He was expecting the trembling hands and the confused eyes. Instead, he was looking at the man who had built half the skyline of Seattle. I didn't look at them. I walked to the head of the table where Penny had pulled out a chair for me. I moved with precision. I placed my leather briefcase on the table with a solid thud. I sat down and crossed my hands in front of me. I looked at the court-appointed mediator, a tired-looking woman named Ms. Alvarez. "Good morning, Ms. Alvarez," I said. My voice was deep, resonant, and completely steady. "I apologize for the delay. I was reviewing the final structural assessments of the case." Ms. Alvarez looked at me. Then she looked at the disheveled couple across the table. Her eyebrows raised slightly. "Mr. Patton," she said, "your daughter and son-in-law have made some very serious allegations regarding your mental state. They claim that you lured them into signing a financial instrument under false pretenses, and that you are suffering from advanced dementia." Travis found his voice. It was a crackling, desperate sound. "He is," Travis shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Look at him! He is putting on an act!" 2 days ago, he didn't know who I was. He spilled coffee all over the kitchen. He thought my wife was his dead wife. He is crazy. Brittany nodded vigorously, tears welling up in her red eyes. "It is true. He is sick. He needs help. We were just trying to help him manage his affairs and he turned on us. He locked us out of our own home." I turned my head slowly to look at them. I didn't blink. I let the silence stretch out until it was uncomfortable, until the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock on the wall. "Travis," I said softly. He flinched. He hadn't heard me say his name without a tremor in months. "You are right about one thing," I continued. "I was putting on an act. But the performance didn't start 2 days ago. The performance started the moment I realized I had raised a daughter who would sell her mother's soul for a week at a beach resort." Brittany gasped. She covered her mouth with her hand. I stood up. I didn't need to stand, but I wanted to loom. I wanted them to feel small. "You claim I am confused," I said, pacing slowly behind my chair. "Let me clear up the confusion. I know exactly who I am. I am Gerald Patton. I am a structural engineer. My job is to find weak points in a foundation house before the building collapses. And for the last year, I have been living in a house that was collapsing because the people inside it were termites." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the pawnshop receipt. I slid it across the table. "This is the receipt for the locket," I said. $500. "That is what you sold it for, Brittany. $500. You looked me in the eye and told me to get over it. You told me my grief was toxic." Brittany started to sob. "Dad." I didn't mean it. I was stressed. I ignored her. I turned to Travis. "And you? You think I am senile because I spilled coffee. You think I am weak because I gave you money. You mistook my silence for stupidity. You mistook my grief for weakness. But let me tell you something about construction, Travis. Before you demolish a building, you have to weaken the supports. You have to clear the perimeter." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table, my face inches from his. I didn't spill that coffee because I was shaking. I spilled it because I needed you to sign that promissory note. I needed you to legally admit that you are a thief. And you were so blinded by your own greed, so eager to get to the airport and spend my money, that you didn't even read what you were signing. That is not my incompetence, Travis. That is yours." Travis turned pale. He looked at the mediator. "He admitted it. He just admitted he tricked me. That proves it." Ms. Alvarez shook her head. She looked at the file in front of her. "Actually, Mr. Moore, under the law, there is no prohibition against a lender swapping a document if the borrower signs it voluntarily. You had every opportunity to read it. You chose not to. That is not fraud. That is negligence." I sat back down. I felt a wave of pure power wash over me. It wasn't the power of revenge. It was the power of truth. I am not here to negotiate a settlement. I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. I am not here to offer you a payment plan. I am here to tell you that the show is over. I pointed at the document on the table. That debt is real. The $200,000 you stole from the trust is real. The foreclosure notice on the cabin you forged a signature for is real. And the fact that you are sitting here in yesterday's clothes with $0 in your pocket is the most real thing that has happened to you in your entire life. Dad, please, Brittany begged, reaching across the table. Her hand hovered in the air, trembling. We have nowhere to go. We are family. You can't just leave us on the street. Family. I repeated the word, tasting the bitterness of it. I looked at Penny. She handed me the micro SD card. I held it up between my thumb and forefinger. It was so small, yet it held the weight of the world. Catherine warned me, I said. My wife. Your mother. She knew what you were. She tried to tell me from the grave, and I didn't want to believe her. I wanted to believe that my little girl was still in there somewhere. So I gave you a test. I played the fool. I gave you every chance to show me kindness. I gave you every chance to say, Dad, are you okay? Dad, let us help you. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. But you didn't. You took the money. You laughed at me. You called me a ghost in my own house. Well, congratulations, Brittany. You got your wish. The father you knew is gone. He is a ghost, and the man sitting in front of you is a creditor, and I am here to collect. Travis stood up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. This is insane, he yelled. You are a monster. You set us up. I will sue you. I will tell everyone what you did. Go ahead, I said calmly. Tell the world that you tried to steal from a grieving widower and got caught. Tell the world that you signed away your life because you were too lazy to read a contract. See who sympathizes with you. I looked at the mediator. Ms. Alvarez, I believe we are done here. The debt is valid. The eviction is legal. And as for my mental state, I think I have demonstrated that I am quite capable of managing my own affairs. Ms. Alvarez nodded. She closed her folder. Mr. Patton, I find no evidence of incapacity. The promissory note stands. Mr. Moore, Mrs. Moore. I suggest you find legal counsel to address the criminal charges regarding the embezzlement. This mediation is concluded. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I picked up my briefcase. I walked toward the door without looking back. Dad, Brittany screamed. Dad, wait. What are we supposed to do? I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I didn't turn around. I spoke to the wood of the door. You wanted a vacation, I said. You wanted to be free of the old man. You are free. Figure it out. I opened the door and walked out into the busy hallway of the courthouse. The noise of the world rushed in to meet me. Lawyers arguing, clients crying, clerks rushing with files. It was chaotic. It was loud. And it was beautiful. I walked down the corridors, my shoes clicking on the marble floor. I didn't feel old. I didn't feel tired. I felt like I had just finished building the most important structure of my life. I had built a wall between me and the people who would destroy me. And that wall was solid. It would hold. Behind me, the door to the mediation room closed, muffling the sounds of their sobbing. I checked my watch. It was 11 o'clock. I had a lunch reservation with Sal, the pawn shop owner. I wanted to thank him properly. I wanted to tell him that the locket was safe. And I wanted to tell him that the secret inside it had saved my life. The mediation room was supposed to be empty. The civil case was over. But nobody had left. The air in the room had shifted from the stale atmosphere of a contract dispute to the electric charge of a crime scene. I stood by the door, my hand still resting on the brass handle, but I didn't open it. I turned back to face them. Travis was still red-faced and panting from his outburst. Brittany was weeping into her hands. They thought the worst was over. They thought they were just broke. They had no idea that the ground beneath them was about to open up and swallow them whole. I looked at Penny. She nodded imperceptibly. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out her laptop. She placed it on the table and connected it to the large monitor on the wall. The screen flickered to life. "What is this?" Travis snapped, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The mediation is done. You said we were done." I walked back to the table slowly. My steps were heavy, deliberate. "The mediation regarding the debt is done," I said. "But there is one more thing. You asked me earlier why I changed the locks. You asked me why I treated you like criminals. I think you deserve an answer." Penny hit the spacebar. The video from the micro SD card began to play. The audio was crisp, filling the small room with the sound of a car engine idling. On the screen, Travis was sitting in the driver's seat of his Mercedes. Beside him was the woman from the affair. But this wasn't the video of them kissing. This was a different file. A file dated just 3 weeks ago. I watched Travis's face. The color drained from his skin so fast he looked like a corpse. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He recognized the conversation. He remembered the moment. On the screen, the digital version of Travis was holding a small orange prescription bottle. He was shaking it. "It is easy, babe," the video Travis said. "The old man takes beta blockers for his heart every morning. They look exactly like these." The woman in the passenger seat leaned in. "What are they?" Travis smiled a cruel, shark-like smile. "Potassium supplements. High dosage. If he takes these instead of his heart meds, his arrhythmia goes haywire. It will look like a natural heart attack. No autopsy needed for a 68-year-old with a history of cardiac issues." The woman giggled nervously. "Are you sure?" Travis nodded. "Positive. I swapped the pills this morning. He has been taking them for 2 days. By the time we get back from Bali, he will be either dead or in the ICU. And once he is gone, the trust fund unlocks immediately. No more waiting for allowances." The video cut to black. The silence in the mediation room was absolute. It was a physical weight pressing down on our chests. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner. I could hear the buzzing of the fluorescent lights, and I could hear the terrifying sound of Brittany's breath hitching in her throat. She turned to look at her husband. Her movement was slow, mechanical. She looked at him as if she had never seen him before, as if he were a monster wearing a human skin. "You swapped his pills," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "You told me you just wanted to put him in a home. You told me the pills were vitamins." Travis scrambled backward, his chair screeching against the floor. "No. No, that is out of context. That is just a joke. We were just talking." I looked at Ms. Alvarez, the mediator. Her face was pale. She had already pressed the panic button under the table. She was staring at the screen, her hand covering her mouth in horror. "That is why I felt dizzy last week," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a knife. "That is why I almost fainted in the garden. I thought it was grief. I thought it was stress. But it was you. You were poisoning me under my own roof." Travis stood up. He looked at the door. He looked at the window. He was a trapped animal. "It is a deep fake," he screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeal. "It is AI generated. He made it up. He is trying to frame me." The door to the mediation room burst open. This time it wasn't a clerk. It was 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies and a detective in a plain suit. They had been waiting in the hall. Penny had alerted the district attorney's office the moment we found the footage 2 days ago. They had been waiting for the civil matter to conclude so they could arrest him without compromising the debt ruling. Travis Moore, the detective said, stepping forward and pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted homicide. No, Travis shrieked. He backed into the corner. You can't do this. I am a citizen. That video is illegal. It was recorded without my consent. The detective didn't pause. He grabbed Travis by the arm, spinning him around and slamming him against the beige wall. The sound of his face hitting the plaster was sickening and satisfying. Washington is a two-party consent state for audio, the detective said, tightening the cuffs. But there is an exception for evidence of a violent felony, and you just confessed to attempted murder in high definition. You have the right to remain silent. I watched them drag him out. He was kicking and screaming, crying for Brittany to help him, crying for a lawyer, crying for his mother. But nobody moved. We all just watched the parasite get ripped from the host. When the door closed behind them, the room felt suddenly larger. Brittany was still sitting in her chair. She was shaking violently. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide, terrified, filled with a horror that went beyond words. She realized that she had been sleeping next to a man who was planning to kill her father. She realized that her greed had almost made her an accomplice to murder. Dad, she choked out. Dad, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know about the pills. I just wanted the money. I just wanted the vacation. I didn't want you dead. I looked at her. I believed her. Brittany was selfish. She was entitled. She was cruel. But she wasn't a killer. She was just a fool who had fallen in love with the devil. I know, I said quietly. I know you didn't know. If I thought you were part of the poisoning, you would be in cuffs right now, too. She stood up, taking a step toward me. Dad, please. I am so sorry. I am so scared. Can I come home? Please let me come home. I will do anything. I will change. I promise. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the little girl I had raised. I saw the fear in her eyes, but I also saw the locket on the table. I saw the receipt. I saw the years of disrespect, the years of taking without giving. I walked over to the table and picked up the locket. I placed it in my pocket next to my heart. You can't come home, Brittany, I said. My home is a safe place, and you brought a predator into it. You let him feed on me for years. You watched him steal my dignity and you laughed. You didn't pull the trigger, but you loaded the gun. But he is gone, she sobbed, reaching for my hand. He is in jail. It is just us now. No, I said, stepping back, avoiding her touch. It is just you now. I have a life to rebuild, and I can't build it on a cracked foundation. I turned to Penny. Thank you, Penny, for everything. I walked out of the room, leaving my daughter alone in the silence. I walked past the elevator where the deputies were loading Travis in. I took the stairs. I needed to move. I needed to feel the blood pumping through my veins, the blood that was finally free of poison. I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. It was noon. The rain had stopped. The sky was a brilliant, piercing blue. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with fresh, clean air. I was alive. Against all odds, I was alive. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow would bring. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver the address of the pawn shop. I had one last debt to pay, and this one I was going to pay with a smile. I found her sitting on a concrete bench outside the courthouse plaza. The noon sun was high and bright, but Brittany looked like she was sitting under a personal rain cloud. She was still wearing the cocktail dress she had put on for the flight home, a garment designed for a beach party that now looked ridiculous against the gray stone of the legal district. Her makeup was gone, scrubbed away by hours of tears, leaving her face raw and exposed. She looked younger than her 32 years. She looked like the child who used to scrape her knees on the driveway and wait for me to pick her up. But I wasn't going to pick her up this time. I was going to teach her how to walk. I approached the bench slowly. When she saw me, she jumped up. Her instinct was to run to me, to bury her face in my chest and let me fix it. She took 2 steps forward, reaching out with desperate hands. "Dad," she choked out. "Dad, please. I have nowhere to go." They impounded the car. Travis has the keys to the apartment, but the landlord said we are evicted anyway. I have $12 in my purse. I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. I didn't hug her. I didn't offer her my handkerchief. I pointed to the empty space on the bench. "Sit down, Brittany," I said. She hesitated, confused by my coldness. She sat down, hugging her arms around herself as if she were freezing. I sat on the other end of the bench, leaving 3 feet of empty space between us. That space was filled with all the things she had done and all the things she had failed to do. "We need to have a conversation," I said, looking straight ahead at the fountain in the center of the plaza. "And it is going to be the last conversation we have about money, ever." "Dad, I know," she started, her voice rising in a panic. "I know I messed up. I was stupid. I listened to Travis. He told me we were rich. He told me the money was just sitting there. I didn't know he was stealing. I thought it was... I don't know what I thought." "You thought you were entitled," I cut in. "You thought that because you were born with my last name, you never had to lift a finger. You thought that my hard work was your birthright. You sold your mother's necklace not because you were starving, but because you wanted to drink margaritas in Bali." "That is not Travis's fault, Brittany. That is yours." She looked down at her lap, shame coloring her cheeks. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I will pay you back. I promise. Just help me get a hotel room for tonight. Help me get some clothes. I will find a job. I will fix this." I reached into my inside pocket. I pulled out a single white envelope. Brittany's eyes locked onto it. I saw the flicker of hope, the familiar spark of relief. She thought it was a check. She thought it was cash. She thought the bank of Dad was open for business one last time. I handed her the envelope. She tore it open with trembling fingers. She pulled out the paper inside. But it wasn't a check. It was a brochure. "What is this?" she asked, staring at the glossy pamphlet. "It is a brochure for a women's transitional housing center downtown," I said. "They provide a bed, a warm meal, and job placement services for women who are starting over." Brittany stared at me, her mouth falling open. "A shelter? You want me to go to a shelter?" "Dad, look at me. I can't stay in a place like that." "You can and you will," I said, my voice hard as granite. "Because that is what you can afford." I turned to face her. "Here is the deal, Brittany. Listen closely, because I am only saying this once. The trust fund is gone. I dissolved it this morning. The money that was in there, the money you and Travis treated like a piggy bank, has been moved into a charitable foundation." Brittany looked like she had been slapped. But that is millions of dollars." "It is," I agreed, "and it is going to do a lot of good for people who actually appreciate it. But I am not a monster. I am not going to let you starve. I have set up a new arrangement for you. It is called the matching grant." She blinked, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means I will match every single dollar you earn," I explained. "You get a job at a coffee shop and earn $15 an hour, I will give you another 15. You work a double shift, I will match it. You save $500 for an apartment deposit, I will give you the $500 more. But if you earn 0, you get 0. Brittany stared at the brochure in her hand. "But I don't have any skills, Dad. I have a degree in art history that I never used. I haven't worked a real job in 5 years. Who is going to hire me?" I shrugged. "The shelter has a job training program. They need people to work in the kitchen. They need people to clean. It is honest work. Your mother worked as a waitress when we first got married. I worked construction before I got my engineering license. We built our lives with sweat. It is time you broke a sweat, Brittany." She started to cry again, but this time it wasn't the frantic crying of a child. It was the fearful, silent crying of an adult facing a mountain they have to climb alone. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Do you hate me that much?" I felt a crack in my heart. I wanted to reach out and hold her. I wanted to tell her it would be okay. But I knew that if I did that, I would be killing her. I would be enabling the very weakness that had led her to this bench. "I don't hate you," I said softly. "I love you enough to let you fail. I love you enough to force you to become a person your mother would be proud of. Right now, you are just a consumer. I want you to be a creator." I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. "I gave the director of the shelter a call," I said. "They are expecting you. It is a 3-mile walk from here. You have good legs. You can make it." "Dad, wait," Brittany called out, standing up. "Just $20. Please, for a taxi. It is humiliating to walk there in this dress." I looked at her one last time. The sun caught the cheap sequins of her dress, making them sparkle. "Humility is exactly what you need right now," I said. "Walk, Brittany. Look at the city. Look at the people working. Look at the real world. And when you get your first paycheck, call me. We can have coffee. I will pay for the coffee. But until then, you are on your own." I turned and walked away. I heard her calling my name once more, a faint, desperate sound that faded into the noise of the traffic. I didn't look back. I knew she was watching me go. I knew she was hating me right now. But one day, maybe 10 years from now, she would understand. I walked to the corner and waited for the light to change. My chest felt heavy, but it also felt clean. I had just performed the most difficult amputation of my life. I had cut off the lifeline. Now it was up to her to breathe on her own. I touched the locket in my pocket, feeling the warmth of the gold. "We did it, Kat," I whispered. "It is finished. Now let's see if she can swim." The house on Evergreen Terrace sold in 3 days. In the current market, a 4-bedroom colonial with a manicured garden and a state-of-the-art security system does not stay listed for long. The day I handed the keys to the new owners, a young couple expecting their first child, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying. That house was a museum of memories. Some were beautiful, like the mornings I spent drinking coffee with Catherine on the porch, but too many of them were tainted. Too many rooms held the echo of Brittany's demands or the phantom smell of Travis's cologne. I left it all behind. I sold the furniture. I sold the china. I even sold the car. I walked out with nothing but my clothes, my books, and the few personal treasures that actually mattered. My new life is located on the 25th floor of a glass tower overlooking Elliott Bay. It is smaller. It is cleaner. And it is entirely mine. There are no guest rooms for ungrateful children. There are no hiding spots for secrets. The walls are floor-to-ceiling windows that let the gray Seattle light pour in, washing everything in a cool, honest glow. For the first time in 40 years, I am living in a space that dictates its own terms. I decided that retirement didn't suit me. Sitting around waiting to die was what the old Gerald did. The new Gerald has work to do. I converted the second bedroom into a studio. I bought a vintage drafting table, the kind made of heavy oak and iron, not the flimsy plastic ones they sell today. I went to the art supply store and bought fresh rolls of vellum high-grade graphite pencils and a brand new set of architectural scales. The smell of the graphite and the sharp tang of the eraser brought tears to my eyes. It was the smell of my youth. It was the smell of possibility. I am not working for a firm anymore. I am not chasing deadlines or arguing with contractors about budgets. I am consulting pro bono for the charitable foundation where I deposited the trust fund money. We are designing a new community center for at-risk youth, a place where kids who didn't have the advantages Brittany had can learn a trade. I spend my mornings sketching rooflines and calculating load-bearing walls. My hands, which used to shake with stress, are steady now. They move across the paper with a rhythm that feels like music. I am building something that will last. I am building a legacy that isn't defined by DNA, but by impact. My social circle has changed too. I don't go to the stuffy country club anymore. On Tuesdays, I meet Sal from the pawn shop for lunch. It turns out he plays a mean game of chess. We sit in the park and talk about history and mechanics. He doesn't want my money. He just wants my company. On Fridays, I have dinner with Penny and Robert. We drink wine and laugh about the absurdity of life. These are my people. People who value honor. People who know the difference between price and value. Every evening before the sun goes down, I step out onto my balcony. The wind up here is strong. It smells of salt water and diesel fuel from the ferries crossing the Sound. I stand at the railing and look out at the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. It is huge and terrifying and beautiful. It reminds me that our problems, no matter how big they feel, are just drops in the water. I reach under my shirt and pull out the locket. It hangs on a sturdy new gold chain. I hold it in my palm, feeling the warmth of the metal against my skin. I don't open it anymore. I don't need to see the hidden compartment to know what is inside. The message has been received. The warning has been heeded. I rub my thumb over the sapphire. We made it, Cat, I whisper to the wind. I am not just surviving. I am living. I am designing a third act that is going to be the best part of the story. I am free. And as I watch the ferry boats cut through the dark water, leaving white wakes behind them, I realize that I am finally the captain of my own ship. The storm is over. The horizon is clear. And I have never felt more at peace. It has been exactly 6 months since I walked out of that courthouse. 6 months since I traded a large, empty house for a small, full life. This morning, I was sitting on my balcony reviewing the blueprints for the new youth center when my phone buzzed against the glass table. It was an unknown number. Usually, I do not answer those, but today something told me to pick it up. I swiped the green button and held the device to my ear, saying nothing. For a moment, there was only the sound of heavy breathing and the muffled noise of a busy street. Then a voice I knew better than my own spoke. Dad. It is me. It was Brittany. Her voice sounded tired. It lacked the arrogant shine it used to have. It sounded like the voice of someone who had been walking uphill for a long time. I have a job, she said quickly before I could hang up. I am working at a diner on 3rd Avenue. I am trying, Dad, I really am. But rent is due tomorrow and I am short $200. Just this once, please. I promise I will pay you back when my tips come in next week. I looked out at the ocean. The old Gerald would have wired the money instantly. The old Gerald would have wanted to stop her pain. But the man standing on the balcony knew that pain was the only teacher she listened to. I remember our deal, Brittany, I said calmly. Send me a photo of your pay stub. If you earned $200, I will match it. If you didn't, then you need to pick up another shift. But I am tired, she whined, and for a second the ghost of the entitled girl flared up. It is not fair, Dad. You have so much. I pressed the red button ending the call. I didn't feel guilty. I felt proud. I opened the contact settings and tapped the option that said block caller. It wasn't an act of malice. It was an act of love. I was blocking her from her own weakness. I put the phone down and picked up my pencil. The lines on the paper were straight and true. They formed a structure that would stand the test of time. To everyone listening to my story, I want to leave you with this. We spend our lives building homes for our families, but we often forget to build boundaries for ourselves. We think love means giving until we are empty. But I learned that true love is knowing when to stop. You cannot save people who are determined to drown, and you certainly cannot save them by jumping in and drowning with them. My name is Gerald Patton. I am 69 years old. I am a widower. I am an engineer. And for the first time in my life, I am whole. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you have ever had to make a hard choice to protect your own peace, tell me about it in the comments below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories of truth and justice. Until next time, remember that the most important foundation you will ever build is your own self-respect.